Welcome to Best Available Podcast, episode 35. A lot to talk about in this episode. I'm not going to waste time on the introduction because we've talked about this is the best time of the year for sports fans for a number of reasons. A lot of basketball tournaments. Now we got the Masters coming up this weekend, WrestleMania coming up this weekend. I might slip in a 30-second bit about that. Major League Baseball opening weekend. And we have an entertainment segment, so stay tuned for that. Our first entertainment segment in a while, so Matt and Ryan will be excited to talk about that. Matt, we have one more game of college basketball, and then we're without it again for a long time. So we need to enjoy this tonight.
Yeah, so it's always a sad time for me when we kind of reach that point when it's like, last game of the year, then you got to wait till November. But this national championship game really should not disappoint. We've talked about it before, mentioned it on the website too, an article I just wrote, that this matchup was originally supposed to happen back in November, December, and COVID prevented it. So it feels like we have been building up to this not only last season, but also this season. So it's really exciting to have. It's sad when I'm going to wake up tomorrow and be like, wow, I'm going to have to wait until November to see college basketball again. But then we'll just watch other basketball because there's still a bunch going on at the professional level. But really good game tonight, Ryan. I'm excited to get into it.
We'll get into that in a second. I did want to start with the game that happened last night, the Women's Championship presented by Capital One. And this was Stanford going up against Arizona, and it was one of the best games of the season. Stanford ended up winning 54-53. I think a lot of people had Stanford coming out of that side of the bracket. Of course, South Carolina was over there as well, but I think a lot of people like Stanford. There wasn't really anybody that expected Arizona to go on the run that they did, especially with UConn and Baylor over there. And they were able to make the championship game really kind of on the back of Erin McDonald, who put together a number of incredible performances leading up to the championship game. She scored 22 in this one on 5 of 21 shooting, but it wasn't quite enough as Stanford was able to pull it out. And Matt, it warmed my heart to kind of see a lot of praise about the women's championship throughout the past couple of weeks. I saw a lot more people tweeting about it and posting about it on social media than I think I've ever seen before, which is promising. And I hope that they enjoyed this game because I think these are two very good teams, but this ended up being better than even I could have expected.
Yeah, so for the people who are kind of just coming around to the women's tournament, like this has been going, and I mentioned this, I think, a couple weeks ago. This has been going on for years, right? I mean, Arike Ogunbowale had that buzzer beater, I guess, when we were in college at some point. Like these exciting finishes, these down to the final possession games, it's like every year. It's like clockwork. And people have made the comparisons to the men's side, and there are more blowouts in the Final Four on the men's side, which is disappointing. But, first thing I want to say, Ryan, you and I have talked about the court before. It got an upgrade for the Final Four for the women. I'm happy. It should have been there from the start, but, we don't have to get into that part. But looked very nice. And the quality of play is awesome, right? And it's great because I think the timing of it really kind of leads right into the WNBA season, right? Because it ends on April 4th. Month later, the professional side kicks up and starts going. So I hope that momentum really kind of goes with it because you have the draft in a couple weeks. Then you have the season after that. So it's a really awesome time to see. You mentioned all the tweets, the mentions on social media. My timeline was very full of that. And you probably wouldn't have been able to even tell that it was like the second day of Major League Baseball or all the other professional leagues going on. Like the nation was in tune to this game, these games, I should say, throughout the weekend. And you mentioned McDonald, by the way. She's going to be a player that is going to have a really, really awesome career in the coming years. Not only just what she's been able to do at Arizona, but also what she's going to be able to do at the next level. So that's a name to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I do want to give credit to Stanford as well and some of their players. Haley Jones was the leading scorer for Stanford in the game. She put up 17 on a very efficient 8 of 14 from the field. But Cameron Brink and Lacey Hull they were contributors as well. They each put up 10 points, and that was enough. I mean, Stanford, they really didn't get a lot out of their bench. They really only played 6 players for the most part, and then other players got a little bit of run in there, but it was really just Jones, Hull, and Brink. They really carried the load for Stanford, and that's all they need. I mean, Stanford got out to a really quick run early on in the game. They ended the first quarter with an 8-point advantage. Arizona battled back, and they even outscored Stanford there in the final frame, but it was nice. Like Stanford, the way they play, the team aspect, it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's aesthetically pleasing to watch the way that the Cardinal play. So as you said, I think you make a good point too with the WNBA season starting up soon. Hopefully the momentum will carry on. I think it will. It seems like over the past year, women's sports are kind of coming more to the forefront. It seems like more people are kind of giving them a chance, which is good. So hopefully they will, and hopefully that rumor about Philadelphia getting an expansion team ends up being true somewhere down the road, because that would be exciting. I think Philadelphia is the perfect city for a WNBA team.
It would be a marriage made in heaven for not only the city but also just having a team there. We'll get excited about that if that comes to fruition. You talk about Stanford. I mean, defensively, Ryan, Arizona took 60 shots from the field. They made 17. So it was just and the fact that it was a 1-point game despite shooting, under 30% from field and three shows how good of a team Arizona was to be able to hang around. But yeah, it was an exciting weekend for sure. I like also that we had the Friday for the women's Final Four. Then we could do the men's on the Saturday. We alternate. It's just like a 4-day weekend right there. And that's another underrated part about having these tournaments going on simultaneously, is that they are kind of staggered a little bit to where you can extend your basketball week even more.
I agree. There's always something on, basically, especially, we've reached the end of it. So it's kind of nice to just be able to close out the season in that fashion. And I'm already looking forward to next season. It cannot come quickly enough. But we do have one more college basketball game. We had 2, and now we only have 1. And this one, it is quite honestly the 2 best teams coming into the season. They will end up meeting in the national championship game, which seems to be something that doesn't happen a lot, but at least we're lucky enough to have that this year. And the first year the tournament is back. Gonzaga and Baylor. So I want to talk about Baylor first, because coming into the tournament, a lot of people are picking against them, myself included. A lot of people weren't impressed. They were worried about the COVID pause. It seemed like the narrative, though, was if they get past that first game against Hartford, then you get a day off, practice some more, regroup some more. You get another game, you build upon what you learn. And the narrative is always if they could just win a couple games, they would probably be in a good position to make a run. And that's what happened. And people are going to look at the final score of that Final Four game. That doesn't mean that Houston wasn't a good team, but Baylor they did everything perfectly. They executed phenomenally, and that's why they were able to win by such a big margin. So I think a lot of people that wrote off Baylor, I think it was fair, but clearly, Matt, this Baylor team, they got some guys. Like, they're really, really, really good in all facets.
Yeah, so this Baylor team only really lost one player from last year's squad, and Freddie Gillespie, who, was a key integral part of the team, but at the same time, they didn't really lose a beat this year. And people forget that Baylor was the best team in the country last season, or one of them. Like, these were the 2 top teams last year among them, and it's the 2 best this year. No one really knows what to expect with the whole COVID pauses, Ryan. Having one in February definitely isn't ideal, right? Michigan was affected by it. Baylor was affected by it. Michigan didn't get any help with injuries when they came back from it. Baylor, listen, I mean, them being in the Big 12 helped them kind of get back up to speed quickly. Then, as you mentioned, it's a good point. The Hartford game, you face an easier opponent, able to get your legs back under you in a neutral setting. I think the Wisconsin game for me really settled in. I'm like, okay, they're back. Like, you beat a veteran-laden Wisconsin team that was a trendy pick for some to at least give them a bit of a run for their money. And then you bring up the Houston game in the Final Four. I mean, Houston holds opponent offenses to really, really low percentages. And Baylor shot almost 50% from both field and three. So their offense is red hot right now. And they're going to need every point they can get tonight because they're playing just a juggernaut of a team offensively.
And that juggernaut Gonzaga, they finally had a close game for the first time in quite a while. I don't think a lot of people expected Baylor and Houston to be the close game out of these two. I saw a lot of people, the spread, I think, at the end was 14 for Gonzaga, and I saw a lot of people saying, oh, Gonzaga is going to cover that one easily. It wasn't like that. You were on this UCLA team from the start. You said, listen, if they get out of the first four, this is a team that showed promise earlier in the season. They have good players, so you were on them from the beginning, so I'll give you credit for that. But I don't think even UCLA fans could not have expected this team to force overtime and come within a couple seconds of forcing a second overtime against the best team in the nation all season long, a team that hasn't lost a game yet. And UCLA had them on the ropes. It was incredible.
Yeah, I mean, they were a couple bounces away from winning. Johnny Juzang, single-handedly carried them through this tournament at some points. They were riddled with foul trouble in almost every game to some extent. They played a couple overtime games. It was kind of a crazy 3-week stretch for UCLA. Really cool to see from Mick Cronin, by the way, a guy who I think's just a terribly underrated coach. I mean, because of where he played or coached at Cincinnati, I feel like he never gets credit for what he did with that program. And now he's at his first high major job and in his second season. I mean, last year obviously couldn't do anything with it because of COVID, but able to get to the Final Four with this team, despite the fact that they don't have Chris Smith, they didn't have Daishen Nix, who opted to go to the G League instead of UCLA. So some of the pieces they thought going into the season they were going to have, they didn't have them going into the tournament. And they beat a bunch of good teams. Listen, it was a really good game. And Mick Cronin's teams traditionally are known for defense. His team offensively this season was crazy good. So, yeah, Gonzaga, you mentioned it, finally got a test. First time since, I don't know, December 2nd, I think, was the last single-digit game they had. It was good to see. I think it's refreshing for Mark Few also, the fact that his team could play a close game in crunch time.
I was going to bring that up. We hear all the time. So this Gonzaga team had not had a test in just the longest time. Would you buy into the cliche that it's almost better they had a test going into this championship game as opposed to if they just throttled UCLA and won that game comfortably? Do you think that helps them at all, or do you think it really doesn't matter?
I mean, I think a good team's a good team, right? I mean, if you're good, you're just going to win by the margin you win by. I mentioned it on the website in my preview for the game tonight. It's really not a disrespect to the West Coast Conference because people love to just slander that conference every year because they say Gonzaga is just way too good for it and the teams in it aren't good. The teams in it are very good. Gonzaga is just like a once-in-a-generation kind of team this year. Like, this is just, they have such a collection of talent that is like on a high major level, number one, and they're in a mid-major conference. Number two, even for a high major conference team, you don't get this much talent. They didn't expect Nembhard to get cleared to come in. Andrew Nembhard kind of fell in their lap. You get a top recruit in Jalen Suggs. Everything kind of lined up for this undefeated run. So I think good teams are just going to win regardless, Ryan, of if it's a close game or a blowout. I think it's refreshing for the coaching staff, though, because it does kind of get into the back of your mind of, oh, we don't want the guys getting complacent or anything, especially during the second half of games. But no, they've had their foot on the gas pedal since Thanksgiving when they tipped off.
So it all culminates in this. You have Gonzaga, a team that has a chance to be the first undefeated national champion since Indiana in 1975-76 when they went 32-0. Coincidentally, the team that Gonzaga beat to get to the national championship. They're the team that's done this 4 times, a 4-time undefeated national champion in UCLA, but they're going up against their biggest challenge yet in Baylor. So how do you see things playing out tonight, in your opinion? I'm going to go with Gonzaga, personally. I was tempted to go Baylor because it's so difficult to win every single game in a season, but I think I'm going to stick with Gonzaga. I think they finally get over the hump this year.
It's a team of destiny this year. I just hope it's a close game because with a lot of teams that have played Gonzaga this year, if you just give up one 3-minute run, like one quick 7-0 spurt, you're out of the game instantly. I think Baylor can still keep up with them the way that they're playing offensively, as I mentioned in the tournament. I'm just hoping for a good game. I'll pick Gonzaga as well. With an undefeated team, I'm just going to keep picking them until they lose. And that's kind of my mindset in any sport. You got to respect it from that regard. But they just keep hitting you with a lot of stuff. And the same with Baylor, too, off their bench. But just the level of talent that Gonzaga has this year is just ridiculous.
We'll see what. Okay, by the way, you brought this up to me last night or the night before. The people that are complaining that the game is too late, get over it. All right, just get over it. This has happened forever, basically. They have to start late, take a 5-hour energy, get a cup of coffee. 9 o'clock's not that late. I believe in you guys if you think it's too late.
But it's also it's a basketball team. I get it for football, for the national championship for football, because they have the 30-minute halftime show. The game itself takes 3 hours anyway. College basketball, you're in and you're out in 2 hours. It's a crisp, clean product, gets you to the 11 o'clock news, a little bit after. It's a lot different than football. I get the complaints for football a little bit, but for college basketball, you could still get to bed at 11:30 and get your 7 or 8 hours.
This is, I will say, if you don't stay up late, you don't get to say that you saw one shining moment happen in real time. That's a big thing. I mean, you could always watch it on YouTube the next day, but that's not the same. You got to watch it while your emotions are high. We just got through this incredible tournament for the first time in 2 years. That's what I think. I'm looking more forward to that than the game, I think. I'm looking forward to the one shining moment at the end of the game, personally.
Well, I didn't know you were such a big one shining moment guy until a couple years ago. I mean, this is something that I was arguing with my college suite mates to leave the TV on so I could watch one shining moment, because we're all watching it freshman year when Chris Jenkins hit that shot for Villanova. I mean, it's electric. It's electric for sure. Gets you in your feels in August when you miss it. Gets you in your feels the night before the season starts. Get amped up, ready to go. It's something that will always hit, no matter what time of the year. So it's consistent. One of the best YouTube videos or things you'll watch live for sure.
So Gonzaga, Baylor, one shining moment tonight. Don't miss it. Another big sporting event, this is just the week of big sporting events, is the Masters. So that's coming up this weekend. It's back in April. Of course, they played it in November last year. So not even a year has passed since the last Masters, which is very weird to say. The defending champion is Dustin Johnson. He enters as the favorite. Now, Matt, I saw a statistic that I thought was kind of interesting. I think it was for the past 10 Masters tournaments, the guy that went in as the favorite did not win. So if they're co-favorites, that was the same thing as well. So the smart thing to do would say that Dustin Johnson's not going to win it and just move on, but I don't think it's that simple. Dustin has been on an incredible run. I think if there's anyone that can repeat, it's him. But there's other good guys in the field too, and I think the first one we have to talk about is the guy that just got his first win in what seems like forever in Jordan Spieth. So he's coming into this tournament with some momentum. We asked about a month ago, is Jordan Spieth back? I think it's safe to say the way he's looked, Jordan Spieth is officially back, and the sport is much better for it.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. It's exciting when golf's best guys are hot going into the Masters, obviously because of the caliber of the tournament. One thing to go back to college hoops, Ryan, when you're watching the game tonight and you hear the Masters music, that's when you know spring has arrived. So we talked about it before, how you hint at it during the NFL playoffs and then the college hoops stuff, but the night of the national championship game, the week of the Masters, we've made it. We're in spring. But to go back to Jordan Spieth, golf's better when those guys are good going into the Masters. It was definitely a run that we had to be cautious about, Ryan. You don't want to buy into him too early, but he has had success in the past, and he will have a chance this week. And to your point about DJ, whenever people ask me, are you going to take the favorite of the field? You always take the field in golf. I mean, unless it's like Tiger Woods in his absolute prime. But it's a talented field this year. So Spieth, you mentioned him. There's a lot of other guys that are going to really make a run. And then also the surprise. There's always a surprise that'll sneak in, maybe day 2, day 3. But yeah, I'm happy for Jordan Spieth. It's been a long time in the making.
I think another guy, as you said, this field is so talented top to bottom. My guy, Ricky Fowler, did not make it for the first time in 11 years, so that's a little disappointing for me. But that just goes to show this field's so talented at this point that, Ricky Fowler not being in it, it doesn't really affect anything. And one of the guys that's going to get talked about a lot over the next week or so is Bryson DeChambeau, a very polarizing figure. I know you're not the biggest Bryson guy. I'm kind of indifferent. I could go either way, but I know why people they're not really a fan of his. He is going to be one of the favorites going into the tournament, a guy that just hits it really far off the tee. He, the drive for show guy, that's him. That's who Bryson is at this point. I'd be a little worried about Bryson going into it. It's just the way that Augusta plays. I don't know if it necessarily suits his play style right now, but I think he always brings excitement, good or bad. So I think in that aspect, it'll be fun to follow along. But in terms of winning, I just can't see Bryson taking home the green jacket this week, and I think that's going to be too much to ask.
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Bryson guy. You're not going to hear a lot of nice things out of me about him. Listen, at the end of the day, he brings in interactions on social media. He brings in attention. Guys like that are productive for any sport, especially golf, when you're trying to appeal to a much younger generation, that when you see a guy rip it off the tee, that's exciting. Yeah, listen, he's been on a tear since basically this time last year when golf itself kind of came back from COVID, right? And hit the gym, got that strength, and he's been ripping it. I agree. I don't know. I think the lights are going to be a little too bright for him. Yeah, I just don't like the guy. So I would hope that somebody else wins.
I think that's fair. I think you're very brave for going out and saying that explicitly. I think a lot of people dance around that subject, but I appreciate your honesty.
Dance around what? Saying they don't like DeChambeau?
Yeah, I think some people kind of be like, he's not my cup of tea. We'll see what happens. Just like I'm doing, basically.
At the end of the day, I think he's a good golfer, right? I don't get me wrong, he's a good golfer, but I prefer other styles of golf, right? So I'm sure he's an interesting guy to talk to, hang out with, but not my favorite golfer.
You brought up a good point. It seems like every year there's always some guy that people don't expect to be on the leaderboard, and just over the course of Thursday, Friday, Saturday, he's just there consistently. So I'm not an expert, but I think a couple of the guys that I'm looking at this week to maybe fill that role, these aren't super long shots. I need to make that kind of clear. Like if you look at the field, you look at where some of the odds are, these guys aren't all the way on the bottom. But they're kind of in the realm to where it would kind of be a little surprising if they did take home the green jacket. So the number one guy for me would be Scottie Scheffler. I think that when you play at Augusta, you need to be able to be accurate off the tee the way that the fairways are here. And I think that Scottie, he's shown that he can be accurate off the tee this season. And I kind of like him to maybe make a run. I think that he has the ability definitely to finish top 10. Maybe he'll surprise. Webb Simpson, another one. He's been consistent this year. Another guy, I'm looking right now, he's 6th in accuracy off the tee in 2021 so far. Even a guy like a Daniel Berger, I think he hasn't always been fully in contention, but he's never really been bad here at Augusta, especially recently. So I think those would be my 3 kind of long shots, I suppose, if you want to call it that. But I mean, if for the fun pick, I will go with Jordan Spieth. I think that it would be just phenomenal if he kind of capped off his officially back tour by taking home a green jacket. I think that would be really, really exciting.
So I don't have the odds up. So if I say a guy that's towards the top, I'm sorry. I'll give you a couple guys. I'm just looking at the roster on the Masters website.
Sure.
So my guy, Tony Finau, it's been said, he's always in the thick of it on Sunday, but just can never get over the hump, right? That's been his thing for a while. He's always in it on Sunday. Don't be surprised if Tony does it again. He's always there. One of the most consistent guys on getting to Sunday and then kind of falling off. Billy Horschel, another guy, Ryan, I don't know where he is, a guy that's been hanging around. And listen, a lot of my golf memory has been since COVID. It came back from COVID, right? Because when we were in school, it would either be like we were running around doing basketball, doing TV shows. And this has been really the time when I've sat down for 5 hours and watched golf. So that's when a lot of my golf memories coming from. So I just want to preface by saying that. My guy, Sungjae Im, I'm always going to throw my name in for him. Guy who can make a run from time to time. But I wouldn't be surprised, though, Ryan, with Horschel or Finau at least being in the thick on Sunday.
I will say another guy that I always want to do well is going to be Phil, and he's in the field again. He has not been very good this year. I'm not expecting him to do anything, but at the same time, he's one of those guys. You never want to count out lefty. He'll hit a couple crazy shots. He'll put himself maybe like 4 back entering the weekend, and then, he has a really solid round. Sunday, you look at the leaderboard, he's like tied for 8th, but he's like in the hunt.
Well, Ryan,
so I hope that Phil does well.
The last time we had a springtime Masters, we had another legend win, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was Tiger Woods. So maybe this year we just keep that momentum. I don't even count the November Masters. It's not even in my memory. I don't even care about it. The last Masters, in my opinion, was when Tiger won. So who knows, Ryan? Maybe we'll get Phil to sneak in and keep the trend going for older legends of the game winning.
Either way, it'll be an exciting tournament. It is a shame that Tiger cannot be there this time. But that's, there's a lot of other talented guys that you can get behind. A lot of people are of the mindset that if Tiger doesn't play, it's not worth it to watch. But this field, as Matt just said at the top of this segment, there's so many great guys, so many talented guys to watch this weekend. So don't just think that because Tiger's not going to be in contention wearing the red on Sunday, it's not worth your time. This is going to be fun.
That argument's got to stop because Tiger's going to retire at some point. And then what are you going to do? Just not watch any golf? I mean, that line was okay maybe 5 or 6 years ago when we were still trying to figure out what the next wave of talent is. But like for the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of guys come onto the scene, like you've mentioned. Like the field's good. Like that argument's got to stop at some point because Tiger's going to stop playing golf at some point. So we just got to appreciate the new guys that we have. And whenever Tiger plays, if he plays again, then we love it for that, right? So that I don't like hearing that argument that much anymore. I respect being a Tiger fan, but at the same time, like there's other guys here to pick a new favorite player kind of thing. Golf's still good. I think golf's in a really good spot, personally.
Yeah. I mean, the question always was, when Tiger goes away, who's going to overtake him? Well, there's a number of guys right now that can take that top spot on the mantle. So I agree that golf's in a good spot. By the way, another pick, Kevin Kisner. I like Kevin Kisner this weekend. Maybe not to win, but I think he'll be somewhere. You'll see his name on the leaderboard somewhere. I'm almost tempted to just name another 10 guys just so I can definitely get one of them, but that's no fun.
That was your strategy in November, just going through the whole field.
Yeah, I just named all 90 guys. Yeah.
Between you and I, we named at least 10 to 15 right there. So we will probably have picked the Masters right. So we could say as a podcast that we picked the winner of the Masters.
Yeah, I mean, the other guys playing this week, Justin Thomas, Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, Brooks Koepka, Colin Morikawa, Paul Casey, Victor Hovland, Patrick Reed. So just some of those names you want to watch out for, too. So if they win, don't be surprised. So one of those guys that we named is going to win. If it doesn't, then we did something wrong. And we'll never talk about golf again. But yeah, so that's fun. The Masters. Get to hear Jim Nantz just give me his calming voice. Just, I'm not the kind of guy to take a nap, but this is prime nap weekend. Just Saturday afternoon at the Masters. It's like, 2 p.m. You just fall asleep, wake up, it's 5:30. Sun's still out. It's beautiful. I got to say that, too. The weather this week is going to be incredible, at least where we are. It's going to be 60s, 70s all week, sun. Like, spring, it really is here. It really is. We made it. Spring is here.
Well, in my post-college years, Ryan, you speak about couch naps. I have mastered the 5-minute couch nap, the unexpected 5-minute couch nap. When you're sitting there watching a game, and then 5 minutes later you wake up and you're like, wow, I feel so much better. So I have perfected the art of that. You mentioned the sunny, the sun's still out on a Saturday. You're starting to smell mulch, right? You hear a lawnmower going across the street or down the road. You smell the barbecue from someone around the street. We're here. We have arrived. Baseball's back. The Masters is here. I will say for Jim Nantz, I much prefer him at golf than for basketball. I don't know if that's a little bit of a hot take, but I much prefer him in the Masters setting than for college basketball.
I agree. Easily. Yeah, he's golf. Yeah. And that's not to say he's a bad basketball guy, but golf, his voice just lends himself well to golf. Also, by the way, we didn't talk about this. He got a contract extension with CBS, so he'll be there for as long as he wants to be. Oh, breaking news on the podcast. UNC to hire Hubert Davis, sources say. So he was an assistant under Roy Williams, and he is your new head coach at North Carolina. Matt, it's not King Rice. I was rooting for him to get the job, but instant analysis, new coach at the University of North Carolina.
Yeah, so, we're King guys, right? We're big fans of Coach Rice. Bummed out for him, but not to say he can't, get on the staff as like an assistant coach or something, be a part of the Carolina family. And listen, for Monmouth fans, you should be happy that he's still with the team because he's really impactful for the program. In terms of Hubert Davis, I think that was a smart hire, right? Wes Miller is the big name because he's been hanging around at Greensboro for so long, and he was kind of being groomed in some ways to be the next coach. But having a longtime coach under Roy Williams just step up and take the mantle, you're not really changing a lot of things, right? He still knows how to recruit at the high major level, so they really shouldn't miss a beat. And you stay in the family, that's great. So good hire. I'm not surprised, honestly. And it was going to either be Wes Miller or Hubert Davis. Those were the two heavy favorites to get that job. So it's a good hire for Carolina for sure. Hopefully they still come up to Monmouth so we could see that in post-pandemic world in December or whenever the game is. So yeah, it's a good hire for them.
Well, before I broke that news, I didn't break it. I'll be fair. I just got an alert. We were going to talk about the opening weekend for Major League Baseball. Something else that meant that spring was back. We got MLB opening weekend in April and not in July, at the end of July. So that made things feel a lot better. I said, damn it, that the Philadelphia Phillies are going to win 95 games in the division this year. 3-0. One of three undefeated teams in baseball right now. The Dodgers aren't undefeated. The Padres aren't undefeated. Yankees aren't undefeated. 3 undefeated teams, and the Phillies are one of them. So I want everybody right now who told me that the Phillies were bad, the offense sucked, the pitching sucked. I want y'all to send me a formal apology letter. I expect that in my DMs or my mailbox at some point this week. The Philadelphia Phillies are going to win the World Series. But let's look at some other teams. Matt, you did not have a great weekend. Your team started off 0-3. I don't know what that's like. but Boston Red Sox are 0-3, got swept by the Baltimore Orioles. So how are you feeling about the Boston Red Sox?
Yeah, they stink. You tried to tell me, you and Glenn and Zach tried to talk me into Garrett Richards being a good signing. He stinks. He threw 61 pitches and only 35 were strikes. I mean, I'm not great at math, but that's almost 50-50. He gave up a bunch of runs. He wasn't very good in spring training. I mean, to be honest with you, Ryan, if the bats were even somewhat awake, I feel like they at least get one game out of that series, maybe two. Because Eovaldi played pretty well. Tanner Houck pitched very well. There was a bunch of defensive errors in that game. So, like, my theory, right, hear me out, is that if the bats just become average, if we just have an average offense, then they'll be decent. Because the pitching, at least through 2 games or 3 games, I mean, I'm going to exclude Garrett, so 2 games, was a pleasant surprise to me. It was a very pleasant surprise that they were just somewhat good. So I didn't have any expectations for them at the beginning of the year. It's not like I'm disappointed. I kind of expected Garrett Richards to give up, 7 or 8 earned runs or whatever the final line score was. So whatever. I'm happy for your Phillies. This city is more exciting when the Phillies are good, to be honest with you, or when any team's good, to be quite frank. Baseball's back. I've come to appreciate, and you've mentioned this before, the late night baseball games. I've come to appreciate just throwing one on, going about my business. It's great. Midnight, you have like the Mariners and the Giants in like the 8th inning. Sure, I'll catch the final 2 innings of that game. It's great. Leads right into like bedtime.
So I want to go through some other storylines just real quick. Matt, the Yankees are a number of teams that did not start off very well. I think the season's probably over at this point. I don't know how you can come back from a 1-2 start. It's just, especially with the Orioles looking as good as they are, that's a team that you're going to have to worry about. Tampa Bay 2-1. So I just don't see how the Yankees dig themselves out of this hole, Matt. I don't see any trade that they could possibly make that digs them out of this. I don't think they're good enough. I really don't.
Yeah, it's
how do you come back from this?
Yeah, I can't wait to see the group chat after this episode. I mean,
you're 2 games back in the division already. Like, you can't overcome this. You just lost 2 out of 3 to Toronto, so they're better than you. Baltimore is a powerhouse. They scored 18 runs. They only allowed 5. So all facets of their team are good. Tampa Bay you can't count out Tampa Bay. They were just in the World Series last year. I think it's over for the Yankees. I think they gotta trade the pieces they have and just start over. You're not gonna win with this team.
Yeah, so the Yankees are kind of in the same boat as the Red Sox, to where offensively it just was not there opening weekend in a lot of chunks of their series. I mean, granted, the Yankees have good players. The Red Sox don't really have that. So I want to preface for our Yankee fans that listen to this by saying that I'm not comparing you to the Yankee or to the Red Sox, but just from opening weekend, you had the same struggles I did, right? Pitching wise, you're looking at the opening series, you gave up 3 runs. You gave up 3 runs in all 3 games. So for the question marks going into it of pitching, I say that's a pretty decent output considering the fact that usually you would score more runs than that. So, once the ball starts flying a little more in June and July, everything will be fine. They'll be on top of the division. Toronto, listen, they'll be in the mix though, and wherever they play. But we did have a correction. Zach did correct us that they're going to move to Buffalo after a couple homestands. Your favorite ballpark, right? Am I quoting him right in saying that they're going to move back after 2 homestands because of temperatures? I think so.
That's what he said. Yeah, I'm a little upset. I like TD Bank Ballpark down there in Florida, but it's whatever. And by the way, I need to make it clear in case people are on the edge of turning this off. If my sarcasm doesn't flow well over a microphone, I just need to make it clear that it's 3 or 4 games for most of these teams. Some teams haven't even played a game yet. Let's wait. I've seen so many overreactions, legitimate takes. People are trying to take from opening weekend. Let's just relax. Let's hit the pause button. So I'm just joking.
I will give one take from opening weekend. I'm going to give a shout out to Johnny Baseball. His Royals can score some runs. again, one weekend, but Johnny, you're going to have at least like an exciting Royals team this year compared to some of the past Royals teams that were not exciting. So happy for my diehard Royals fan friend Johnny on that one.
One of the other big things that happened this weekend was the pitching duel between Jose Barrios and Corbin Burns. Someone that has Burnsy on his fantasy team, I was very excited. But that was a perfect way to kind of kickstart opening weekend. That it really gave it a jolt. These guys had dueling no-hitters through, I think, what was it, 5 or 6 innings. They were punching out guys. And, there's some good hitters on both of those teams, the Brewers and the Twins. It's not like they were a bunch of slouches. Like that's what I missed. I'm the weird guy that appreciates that more than like hitting bombs and scoring a lot of runs. I appreciate pitching duels like that more than a bunch of offense. I wish we got that more. So to see that opening weekend was extremely impressive. That was probably the highlight of the weekend for me.
Yeah, I appreciate pitchers duels as well. As a broadcaster, Ryan, I think you and I can both agree that the quick, efficient games with a couple highlight plays are much better on the broadcast side than getting the 5-hour slugfests. Obviously, you'll get more calls for your reel off of a slugfest, but if there's a pitcher's duel on, I will watch it over, a 15 to 12 game. So we are both in the minority, but I will stand by you with that take.
Yeah, I've always appreciated them more, and I think your point about as a broadcaster's perspective, I think that's a shrewd point to make as well. Yermin Mercedes, I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation. I apologize. On the White Sox, he started off the season, I think it was 8 for 8 or 9 for 9. I think it was 8 for 8, and then he got another hit later. So that's a guy that's been getting a lot of play. Nick Castellanos has looked very good so far at the plate and with his fists, as he was part of a brouhaha after he crossed home plate against the Cardinals. And he got suspended for I don't even know what, and he's going to appeal it. I hope that they take away the suspension. But all of this is to say that it's great to have baseball back. It's great to see all the players back. It's great to see some fans back in the stadiums. I don't quite know if we need to have 40,000 fans in certain stadiums around the country. I'm not going to say any names, but it was nice to see 8,800 fans at the Phillies games this weekend. Baseball is better when there's not cardboard cutouts in the stands. You need kind of that fan murmur, that fan, like legitimate fan cheering and booing. So that was another highlight for me. Just hearing the fans again was huge.
Well, I don't know if you'll agree with me on this. I think baseball is the sport above all else that needs fans present. Yes. I mean, in order to make it a watchable product on TV, you need people in the stands. Because at least in other sports like football, you're focused almost strictly on the field. Really in any other sport, right? Hockey, basketball, you don't have fans kind of in the background. So when the camera shots are, the standard one between the pitcher and home plate, there's people there as opposed to, like, as you said, a cardboard cutout. It's just so much better just for the TV aspect of it, which is why I struggled at times to watch games last year, just because when there's no sound at all, like in other sports, if you play with just no sound at all, you could hear, like, players calling out plays in basketball, at least the skates in hockey. I mean, the only sounds in baseball happen maybe once every 10 to 30 seconds, right? The glove, the ball hitting the glove, the ball hitting the bat, and then it's just dead silence. So it's the fan murmur is back, as you said. So it's definitely exciting to see some people back. And I'm happy with some people, as you said, right? We don't need 40,000 in some places. I'm happy with the 8,000 to 10,000 people, wherever you are. It still fills up. You could still hear them. They still get rowdy, too. I mean, Yankee fans on opening day, that was a loud crowd for not too many people. So fans could still make noise. You don't have to, pack a stadium in April. So not that we're calling any teams out.
Nope.
Nope. Just hypothetically.
I did want to end, this isn't Major League Baseball related, but we talked about King Rice earlier, so I wanted to give the Monmouth Hawks baseball team a shout out, because after losing Game 1 to Quinnipiac, the front half of their doubleheader on March 20th, They have not lost a game since, and they have looked incredible. They are now 11-1. They've won 10 in a row. Their offense has been putting up runs, but the pitching staff has been really good as well for the most part. So I wanted to give a shout out to them for that because that's impressive, winning 10 straight games. A lot of these doubleheader games as well, just based on the way that the schedule is this year. And of course, the softball teams, they're once again, they're very good as well. They are 7-1. They lost on the back half of a doubleheader on March 20th, but since then they've won 6 in a row. So both baseball and softball teams at Monmouth, they're looking pretty good this year. So we need to give a shout out to them, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like every other day we see some graphic from the legend Chuck Marvel or score graphic that said somebody won or somebody had a great game. So, Chuck and Gary are very happy this season, watching those games, I'm sure. It's cool to see that baseball is kind of red hot too, right? Because softball has been the dominant team. And baseball is always kind of like in the middle of the pack, or I think one year they were the top seed in the tournament in Staten Island. I can't remember, but yeah, it's cool to see both are there. It's a shame we can't really go and watch them play, but yeah, Hawks are flying, man. Spring sports, and then you got fall sports in the spring. You got... Yeah. They got like all sports going on there right now. The football team's running over everybody. Field hockey's winning some games. Soccer. So it's a busy time in West Long Branch. It's a busy time for a lot of those smaller schools that had the smaller conferences that opted to play in the spring instead of the fall. So everyone's running around doing a bunch of stuff.
That's good. It means we're starting to get back to normal, which is good. This isn't Disney Plus in Glen, the next thing that we're doing. We're not bringing that back yet. We're bringing it back eventually. Not quite yet. That probably, as Matt said, when the spring, when all this stuff kind of goes away and we're not left with a lot of sports, that'll probably be a good time to bring it back when we need stuff to talk about. But this needed its own segment, I guess, because the time-space continuum collapsed after it was revealed that I had started watching Star Wars for the first time. So we needed to talk about it. I'm watching them chronologically, and so for those of you that don't know anything about Star Wars like me, that means that I'm not watching them in release order. I'm watching them in episodic order. So I started with The Phantom Menace. I watched Attack of the Clones, and now my next task is Revenge of the Sith. So that'll either be tonight or tomorrow. But we have our resident Star Wars expert on the show right now, so we needed to talk about it. So that's... what would you like to talk about? You're the expert. I only watched 2 episodes so far, so how would you like to steer the conversation?
Well, I just want to hear your takes on the movies, Ryan, because I have watched these films more times than I would like to reveal, but I want to get your takes on them.
So the first one, I think I got this when Glenn had started watching. This isn't Disney Plus and Glenn. I'm just bringing up his name for purposes of this. He said that the first episode, it was kind of slow, and I agree. There were times that I felt that the things were dragging on a little longer than they needed to in episode 1. I thought, I hate to say this because I'm going to sound rude. The guy that they got to play Anakin in episode 1, it wasn't just him. I guess it was just more prevalent because he was speaking a lot more as the movie went on. The dialogue I had an issue with. It did not sound natural to me at all. It sounded like, I remember back when we did assignments for Harmon and I would kind of write something down as on the script and he would review. He's like, is this how people talk in real life? Is this how you talk in real life? It kind of felt like that. Like these people would not talk naturally. But I'd say overall, the first episode, it brought me in. If I didn't like it, I wouldn't keep watching it. But it did just enough to drag me in. And then the second episode was much better, Attack of the Clones. I liked the story of that one a little more. It was kind of neat to see both Obi-Wan and Anakin grown up now at this point. Although it seems like the Queen and then the Senator, now Senator, just doesn't age at all in that timeline. It also seems that Anakin, who was about 3 years old in the first episode driving the ship in the race, has suddenly grown up to want to be in a romantic relationship with the queen/senator. So that was kind of a plot hole that I needed, that I didn't really understand. I was very upset that Quago died in episode 1. I really liked him a lot, but the first 2 episodes, they've done enough for me to want to watch episode 3. So now I guess I made it through the first 2, so now I got episode 3. So now I think I'm in a good spot to watch the remaining ones.
Yeah, Revenge of the Sith is one of my favorite Star Wars films of all time. And Glenn and I will disagree on this. He's a much bigger fan of, again, it's not Disney Plus and Glenn, we're just mentioning his name. He's a bigger Disney Star Wars film guy. And we will debate on that, as maybe we'll have him on the show to debate it. But he also watched it when Disney came out, right? Like this, when it's still fresh. And I'm kind of more of the older school way of thought. But in any case, I agree. The Phantom Menace is at the bottom of my rankings. But if you cut out 40 minutes of it, it instantly shoots up. Because they spend too much time on Tatooine. They spend too much time building up to get to Tatooine. The pod race, I think Glenn made this point, and I agree with it, is just too long. The racing scene itself is just too long.
Yes.
You don't need to show all 3 laps in full, right? It's not a NASCAR broadcast. So I think he brought up a very good point. If you just cut out like 10 minutes of that, I think that helps the cause anyway. You bring up his age to actor's age, that, something I never really noticed until I grew up a little bit, because these came out during our childhood. They did. So I never really understood it until now. He's like, I don't know, 8 or 9 in The Phantom Menace, and then he's suddenly like our age, I guess, in Attack of the Clones. But the timeline doesn't add up in terms of the number of years. You mentioned Natalie Portman. Did not really look like she aged from one to the other. So that's where it kind of threw that plot hole in there. Yeah, the dialogue, I also want to touch on that. George Lucas, the creator, did say that it was intended to sound like soap opera-esque, I guess is the best way to describe it. So that was, I guess, somewhat intentional. But the dialogue in the first 2 movies is not great. I will agree with you.
So, yeah, in terms of the race, that little long-ass straightaway they have, like coming back to the start-finish line, they showed that too much. Like, if they just cut out most of that, it would have been fine. But I don't need to see from one end all the way down to the other of the desert, every single ship. It's just, that was a little too much. But overall, they've been solid so far. I think that's the biggest takeaway. Overall, I don't need to call him Captain Glorp Glorp. I now know that there's a Galactic Republic and a Trade Federation. And I know that these people have actual names now. I was kind of close, like Glorp Glorp and Dooku. That's kind of similar if you think about it. And he sounded out a little bit, but there's enough going on to keep me pulled in. So I will say that.
It's kind of cool with a lot of these films too. Like, that's where a lot of these actors really got their start, right? I mean, Ewan McGregor kind of became famous from Star Wars. Natalie Portman, I think, became famous from Star Wars. 2 of the better characters in that trilogy, I think, Padme, Obi-Wan, and also Count Dooku. Massively underutilized character in those movies, in my opinion. Massively underutilized. I want to see what happens, or what you think of Revenge of the Sith, because that movie just does not stop in terms of just turns and twists. Attack of the Clones was also one of my favorites as a kid, right? Because you get like the clone army coming out and you're like, whoa, this is like so cool. Like all the Jedi and the clones fighting all the battle droids. So as a kid, I loved the final 40 minutes of Attack of the Clones. The first part of the movie I never really appreciated until I got older, but yeah. You got past the 2 that you need to get through. I said the same thing to Glenn. If you watch it in chronological, you just got to get through the first 2 movies and then you're good. So you got through them.
I do have to say that Obi-Wan looking the same in episode 1 as Anakin in episode 2 threw me off a little bit. I know they're different people. That messed me up a little bit initially.
Well, that's why they gave him the beard in the second one and the long hair. Well, that's also like, so I'm gonna sound like a total nerd here, but Jedi Padawans, right? For like because you could be like a different species as opposed to humans, right? You could be like, alien. I'll just call them aliens. Like in terms of human Jedi, right? The human Jedi have that kind of look, right? It's kind of like the little braid, I guess, coming down. So the queen,
is that like a mandatory? You got to have that braid of hair coming down.
Yeah. So then once you become, I'll call it graduate. Once you become a Jedi Knight, then they cut it off with a lightsaber, and then you're like a Jedi Knight as opposed to a Padawan. Okay. So it's like a little ceremony when you get to that point. You pass your Jedi trials. You build your own lightsaber as a Padawan. That's part of it as well. So yeah, I sound like a total nerd, but I don't really care. So that explains that little part of it.
Also, episode 2, it had more comedy in it. I know they're not meant to be comedies, but there were some just one-liners that made me chuckle a little bit, especially like the one where they're about to get executed, and they say that, "Oh, I was here to rescue you," and then he looks at the handcuffs, he looks above, he's like, "Good job." So that was kind of funny, but yeah, I am intrigued to see what is to come in the future. I think that's the best way to put it. Yeah, I'm now intrigued.
Speaking of the humor, there's a lot of humor in the Disney movies. Another divisive part of those movies, for better or worse, it's in there. I think it's well-timed in all of them, Disney or just Lucasfilm movies. I think it's well-timed comedy. So yeah, you're approaching the faster-paced movies, I guess. But you also, I think you'll be fine with it too. When you watch them in chronological order, you make that big jump in terms of production from 2005 for Revenge of the Sith to like the 1970s for A New Hope. So it's going to be a little bit of an adjustment to go from like CGI to just, dioramas, or however they shot that. I don't even know, but that's a little bit of an adjustment.
So that was Ryan and Matt Talk Star Wars. After this, I guess the next thing on the list is Marvel. I don't even know when I'm going to start with that.
You got like 20 movies, Ryan. You got to start watching them like 2 a week. Crank them out.
We'll see. This itself took about 3 years for someone to tell me to start watching Star Wars, and then it took 3 years. So we'll see what happens in the future with everything else. But that was, I don't think there's any other sports stuff. WrestleMania is this weekend for WWE fans. That's a big weekend for them. So that'll be fun. I think they're bringing in fans for it. I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure they're bringing in fans. So that'll be neat. That's about it. Unless you have anything else that you feel is pressing to discuss. NASCAR is off, so we can't have our NASCAR minute this week.
Yeah, I can't really think of anything. We're gonna have some cool draft coverage coming up on the site. Stay tuned for that. We got some cool things we're cooking up. Well, I'm not gonna throw out any of our other bigger plans, Ryan, in terms of other cool surprises for the website. But yeah, draft coverage will probably for us start next week. I guess we'll talk about why Mac Jones is not the number 3 overall pick.
We will, yes, and that'll be the crux of what we talk about over the next few episodes. Is a lot of NFL draft stuff leading up to it, the actual draft itself. But we'll have other stuff in there too. Got baseball, we got hockey playoffs are going to start relatively soon, so that'll be something that we can talk about. So yeah, we got a lot of fun stuff. I want to thank you all for listening to this episode. We'll catch you all again next week with some more fun content. Be sure to share this with your friends, share everything with your friends, and thank you for listening. We'll catch you again next time.